welcome back to my channel. Welcome if you're new. My name is Hallie and I'm so happy that you're here. It is time for my January wrap up. I had such a good month of reading this month. I think it's because, like I've said a million times at this point, this was the month that I discovered that I really am just a mood reader, and letting myself mood read and switch between books really just helps me read, especially with ADHD, because I cannot focus on it if I'm not interested in it. Like, I can't just read it because it's on my TBR. I also need to be in the mood for it. So I really feel like that's the only reason why I was able to read as many books as I did, because looking back at the month, it doesn't even feel like I was like forcing myself to read or like so tired of reading but I just kept going or like missed out on things because I was reading. Like, it just feels like it was such an easy month of reading, and I really enjoyed all of these books so much. I think there was only one 3-star in all of these, so really it was just such a good month of reading. So this month I read 8 books. One of them I read on my Kindle. I'm just gonna try and go over these in the order that I read them. So the very first book that I read this month was actually on my Kindle. It was The Fake Out by Stephanie Archer. It is the second book in the Vancouver Storm series, and it's like a hockey romance. I rated this 5 stars. It was so good, so cute. I've only read 2 of Stephanie Archer's books. The first book in the series, which is Behind the Net, and then The Fake Out, and they've both been 5 stars for me. I just love Stephanie Archer's writing, and specifically in The Fake Out, I loved the character development because it went beyond just the female main character and the male main character. It was also a lot of the side characters. You're basically following Hazel and Rory. Hazel just got out of a toxic relationship. Her ex-boyfriend cheated on her, and she is a physical therapist for the Vancouver Storm hockey team, which in the first book, it actually follows her younger sister and like her relationship. So that's kind of like the tie-in so far between the 2 books in the series. But she is a physical therapist for the Vancouver Storm's hockey team, and it's either midway through the season or like at the beginning of the season, her ex gets switched onto the team that she is a physical therapist for, and then she ends up being his physical therapist. I'm pretty sure he requested her or something. I don't know. He's really annoying, and so he's trying to like take advantage of the situation and make her feel uncomfortable and like whatever. So she ends up going to Rory because he's the best player on the team, and she's like, who could I make him most jealous with? The best player on the team, obviously. But she does not like Rory at all, but she ends up making a deal with him to fake date him in order to make her ex jealous. So that's basically the gist of the story, but it's so much more than just that. It really just had such undertones of like self-love, following your dreams, speaking positively to yourself and thinking positive thoughts about yourself, and just so much. And there was so much character development with the female main character, with the male main character, with their parents. It was just so much more than just them two, but then also them two was so cute. I just love it so much, and I'm so excited to see what else Stephanie Archer comes out with in the series. There was some hinting at the end of the book for a 3rd book in the series also, so I'm so excited for that. And I also want to go back and read some of Stephanie Archer's older books now too, because the 2 books that I have read from her have both been 5 stars. So I'm like, okay, I clearly like her writing, so I really want to go back and see what else she has written and see if I like it as much. So started off the year really, really good with that one. After that, the next thing I read was Hooked by Emily McIntyre. This is a dark romance. It's like a Peter Pan retelling kind of, but it's not in the way that you would think. It's like set in modern day, and essentially the only things that are themed off of Peter Pan are like the characters' names, really. And like, I guess Hook owns a boat and stuff like that, but it's more, I would say, like a mafia romance. I mean, I don't know. It technically is a Peter Pan retelling, so I don't even know why I'm going on and on about this. It's a dark romance. I rated this, I think, I'm gonna pull up my Goodreads because I have a terrible memory. I think I just rated this 3 stars, mainly because the plot was good and interesting, and it had some plot twists that I didn't see coming. But this was my first ever dark romance that I've read, I think. Well, I guess Twisted Love was a dark romance, but it wasn't like this. This was like a more aggressive dark romance, and I didn't absolutely love it. There was just some things and like the spice that I didn't know if I loved, but it's still like a good book. Like, if you like dark romance, I really think you would like this. So that's why I gave it a 3, because it's still good and I would recommend it if that's your taste. It's just depending on like what your taste is, really. I just didn't think it was for me, and I probably won't read any other books in this series, but I don't want to say I won't because you never know. Sometimes I'm feeling crazy. I'm just like, maybe I will like it, and then I just try it. So 3 stars. It was okay. After that, I read Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. This is actually the first Ali Hazelwood book that I have ever read, and I really, really liked it. I honestly was a little bit nervous to read it because I know that she writes STEM romances, and so I didn't know if I would get bored. Like, I really have a hard time focusing on books, and so I have to be like very engaged in the story, or else I'm like daydreaming, I'm wandering, I'm looking around the room, I'm having to reread entire chapters because I'll finish the chapter and be like, huh, what was that? So I was really, really nervous that I just was gonna be too bored through the story if it was talking so much about like the science aspect of things, or just, I don't know, I just was really intimidated by it. But it was so good. It was so good. It was so cutie patootie. I love the main character, and honestly, I actually really liked the STEM part of this book, which I did not anticipate. It was so fun and cool to see her chase her dreams in this career that is really like a male dominated field, and I feel like the way that she wrote about it being a male dominated field and how hard it is to get positions and to get jobs and going through the interview process, like it was all very realistic. It really made you connect to Elsie, the main character, so much more because it felt so real, and you just like were rooting for her through this whole thing, and it just was so good. It was so much better than I anticipated, honestly. I ended up rating this one 4 stars. I'm so glad that I read an Elsie Silver book and I didn't let myself stay intimidated by it, because now I'm even more excited to read some of her other books as well. After that, the next book that I read, A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J Maas. Yes, I finally have entered the Sarah J Maas world, and let me tell you, I am not disappointed. This was so good, and so many people say, oh, you just have to suffer through the first book. Trust me, if you can just suffer and make it through the first book, you'll be so glad when you get to the second and third books. Like, they're so good. Who is suffering? What am I suffering about? Because this was so good and I ate up every second of it. Genuinely, as soon as I started it, I was already so engaged and so just like brought into the world. I love Sarah J Maas's writing because I'm already the type of person who, when I'm reading, I see it as a movie, but like her writing especially, there's something about it that just instantly teleports you into this world, and the world is so believable, and her descriptions of things, it just gets you so connected and so into it and so invested in the story. And I loved that so much. And this book was really interesting because I knew it was the first of a series. A lot of people were saying you have to suffer through it. I knew that there would be a lot of setup because there's quite a few books that come after this. So I tried not to get my hopes up too much before reading this, honestly, so that I wouldn't be disappointed. But I loved it. Honestly, for the first like half of it, or like, yeah, probably like the first half of it, or maybe two fourths. That's still half, girl. For the first like 2/3 of it, it really just felt like a cozy romance. Like, it wasn't necessarily high stakes. It wasn't necessarily going crazy plot-wise. It just really was a cozy little fantasy. And then all of a sudden, it's like you turn the page, things are the highest stakes possible. And now the plot's going crazy, and I'm so invested, and I cannot put the book down until I finish it because I need to know what happens. So this was so good. I ended up rating this one 4.5 stars. I'm so invested in the characters, and I cannot wait to go farther in the series. I genuinely want to do nothing but like binge the rest of the series. So yeah, so glad I started the year off reading this. After ACOTAR, the next book that I read is Shatter Me by Tahereh Mafi. This is the first book in the Shatter Me series, so I kind of started a lot of series this month, honestly. If you don't know what this book is about, you follow the main character, Juliet. She basically has this power where anytime that she touches somebody, she like injures them and like could accidentally kill them. She ends up getting sent to like a, what are those called? Like a psych ward, like a facility for crazy people, even though she's not crazy. And then the government wants to try and use her powers in the war, kind of take advantage of her and use her as a weapon, because this is a dystopian fantasy. So it's kind of set in the future, like in a, not an apocalyptic world, but you know, just dystopian. That's essentially what this is about. And you just follow Juliet and see her growth throughout the story. I ended up really liking this book. I was kind of on the fence for this one as well. I don't know why the cover just made me feel like it was going to be really YA. So I didn't have that high of hopes for like getting super invested and loving the story. And honestly, I will say for like the first half of the book, it did go a little bit slow for me, but the second half of the book, it really picked up, and I did not expect the plot to go where this went. By the end of the book, I was so much more invested and so much more intrigued to see what happens in the next books in the series. This has, I don't even know how many books is in the series actually. It's like a longer series, especially if you read all of the novellas in between the books as well, which I would like to do. There's like a lot of books to the series, but yeah, the first half, I honestly didn't know if I was going to continue the series, but by the second half, I was sold. I was very invested, and I really want to see where things go from here, because I feel like there's there's so many possibilities of what could happen next. So I'm very, very interested to see what will happen next. After Shatter Me, the next book that I read is Heartless by Elsie Silver. This is the second book in the Chestnut Spring series, and it is a cowboy romance. This one follows Cade Eaton, aka Daddy Cade. He is a single dad. The female main character, her name is Willa. She is the best friend of the female main character of the first book. She ends up being his nanny for the summer. And so you just follow Willa and Cade and their little love-hate relationship while she watches his son all summer on the ranch. It was just really cute. Honestly, when I started the Chestnut Spring series, I was really on the fence about cowboy romances because I'm just not super into like cowboy things, you know, like I don't have anything against it. I just like have never been, I don't know, I just have never even thought about it, I guess. But I love the Chestnut Spring series so far, and I feel like now that I've read the second book, I'm even more invested to read the third book, and I feel like once I read the third book, I'll be even more invested to read the next book. So it's kind of one of those things where you start to just like bond with the characters, and in each book you get to see all of the surrounding characters and the family too. So I feel like that's also why it's making me get more and more invested as the book comes, because in this book I got to see the characters from the last book as well as some of the characters that'll be coming up, and like the family dynamic of all of the Eaton boys on the ranch. Like I just love it so much. And Elsie Silver's writing, like she's low-key so funny. First of all, like I'll be actually giggling while I'm reading her books, just like the banter between the characters or like the text messages that are involved. And honestly, in this one they have a family group chat, and every time the family group chat conversations would pop up, I would be like actually laughing out loud because it's just so funny. It's so funny, and I feel like it's so realistic. So yeah, I really, really like this one a lot more than I thought I would too, because this is a age gap book as well, and I've never read an age gap book before. So honestly, I rated this 4.25, and I really feel like the thing that stopped it from being a 5-star for me was just the age gap parts, because I think that that's just not my favorite trope, mainly because he just talked about it so much. I feel like, first of all, he wasn't even that old, and so I don't know if that's supposed to be like part of his character, like he's been forced to be so mature his whole life that he feels older than he really is, and he needs to like give himself a break. Like that would make sense to me, but honestly it kind of just was annoying, so I had to kind of just pretend like that wasn't happening, because every other part of the book I really, really love. And in this you get to see a sneak peek at the characters that the third book follows, and that made me so excited to read it. So yeah, moving on to our last two books, The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. This book was a wild ride, let me tell you. I did not expect to love this book the way that I love this book. Obviously, I feel like everyone that you hear talking about this book is like, it's so good, it's so good. And really everyone did such a good job explaining this book and like hyping it up, but I genuinely feel like you just don't fully understand, and you won't be able to explain how this book makes you feel until you read it. It's so crazy how it's like simultaneously the cutest, most wholesome, just sweetest little story, but then also just so emotional and so raw and so real and deep, and just, but it's also lighthearted at the same time. Like how is that possible? It shouldn't be possible. It is possible. It's so good. I rated this 5 stars. To give you a quick synopsis on what this is about, it is about your main character Clementine. Her aunt passes away, and her aunt were super, super close. So when her aunt passed away, she put it in her will that Clementine will get her apartment, but it's a magical apartment. So randomly you'll come home and open the door, and then inside the apartment will be 7 years in the past, but you have no control over when the apartment brings you to the past versus the present. And so one day she gets home from work and she goes into the apartment, and it's 7 years in the past, but there is a random man there that she has never met. She doesn't know who he is. You basically just follow the story from there, and it is so good. Like I know from the plot it doesn't sound like it would be life-changing. I know it is. I just am not the same. Read it. It's so good. The very last book that I read in January is Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. This has been a highly anticipated read for me because I really like hockey romances, especially with the way that everyone talks about this book. I was so excited to get to it. I ended up rating Icebreaker 4 stars. I really, really liked the story. In the story you follow Stassi and Nate. Stassi is a figure skater and she's training for the Olympics, and Nate is a hockey player and he is trying to get into the NHL. At their college they have 2 different ice skating rinks. They end up having to share a rink, and you kind of just follow their story from there. But I loved this book so much. I feel like I can relate to Stassi so much. She just has like a lot of anxiety and feels the need to be in control of things and plan things out and this and that, and is just like really hard on herself. And Nate is just like the ultimate golden retriever, and he was really just there for her to support her so much, and I loved that so much. And the communication in this book is so good because Stassi goes to a therapist throughout the book. I mean, even before the book started, like her whole life she's gone to therapy. therapy. So the communication in this book is so good, like to the point where I feel like you could take advice from how they deal with things in the book, which is kind of crazy. It was so good. My only critique is that I wish that you got more of a backstory, not necessarily a backstory, but just more plot development with Nate as well, because essentially this book I feel like is mainly about Stassi, and Nate is there just supporting her, and like you get some of their relationship and like some of her friendships with the hockey team, but I really feel like there was so much more that could have been done with Nate's story as well, with like his family and some of his issues and stuff like that. But I feel like the main reason that that's a critique for me is because the Fake Out has like similar things, and Stephanie Archer did such a good job at including plot development with both of the main characters instead of just one or the other. So I feel like that's kind of the main reason that I'm even picking that, but it was still such a good book, like so cute. I love the two main characters. I love the way it ended, and all of the guys on the hockey team are such golden retrievers as well. Like I want a book for every single player on the hockey team. I just love them all so much. So I'm really glad that I finally read it, and I'm so excited to read Wildfire. Those were all the books that I read in January. Again, it was crazy good reading month. I really cannot believe I read this much in January. It's getting dark in here very quickly. Sorry. The sun is currently setting, so I gotta hurry up. But yeah, these are all the books that I read in January. I'm going to be filming a February TBR soon, so if you want to see all the books I read next month in February, make sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.